questions, and we'll save them at the end, do our best to answer as many as possible, and follow up with you after the webinar. Also want to remind you to stick around. After the Q&A, we'll be doing a giveaway to 5 technicians at random for an OTC 3200 smart battery tester and a 3112 battery reset tool. Now I'd like to hand the floor over to Doc Watson, OTC field trainer, to walk through some of our test procedures. Doc?
Thank you. All right, so what is a diesel particulate filter, or DPF? Well, diesel engines, just like gas engines, emit pollutants in the air, and to reduce the amount of those pollutants, 07 and newer diesel engines have been fitted with a filter and the exhaust pipe to capture soot particulates, and this is called the DPF, or diesel particulate filter. The filter element is made of porous catalytic coated silicon carbide, which allows exhaust gases to pass through while trapping that solid material from the exhaust. This decreases particulate matter, or soot, and eliminates exhaust smoke. The DPF collects particulates while the engine is normally running. To prevent clogging, the particulate matter is periodically burned off, leaving ash and yielding carbon dioxide and water. This process is what we call the particulate filter regeneration. There are 3 stages of regeneration: active, passive, and forced. So we'll start with the first one. Active regeneration is accomplished by changing parameters in the engine to increase exhaust temperatures inside that DPF. This requires precise knowledge of the engine's operating parameters. Because of this, the engine management approach is performed by the OEMs that have that direct access to the information about the engine parameters. Among the active strategies used are late or post-injection of fuel into the combustion chamber, changes to the turbo boost, changes to the EGR valve, intake air throttling, and retarding the injection timing. All these methods can raise the exhaust temperature, but they also have a negative impact on the vehicle's fuel economy and power. So the term that I want you to remember is active regeneration means fuel is burned strictly for the purpose of increasing exhaust gas temperatures in order to get the temperature necessary to burn the soot out of the DPF. The alternative to using post-injection in the cylinders is heating the exhaust system directly. This is called passive regeneration. When exhaust gas temperatures are elevated above 575 degrees and up to 950 degrees. These temperatures may be reached when the engine is under heavy load. Under heavy load, the combusting fuel increases the exhaust temperature needed to carry out this reaction. This is the most efficient method of increasing exhaust temperatures, and it typically uses 35 to 50% less fuel than the post-combustion injection technology. This method also minimizes engine wear with no change to the engine performance, but it's much harder to achieve. So remember, the term passive regeneration means the engine is working hard enough under its own power that the exhaust gas temperatures are hot enough to keep the regeneration of the DPF in process, and it's not necessary to burn extra fuel to accomplish this. Then there's forced regeneration. If both passive and active regeneration attempts have failed, and as a result exhaust back pressure has become excessive, the vehicle will soon go into limp-in mode. It will lose most of its engine power and be almost impossible to drive. When this happens, the only option left is a forced regen. This process involves using a dealer-level diagnostic scan tool connected to the OBD2 port under the dash. Then it you as a technician are going to instruct the vehicle engine computer to regenerate the DPF. This procedure is sometimes programmed by the manufacturer to ideally take place while the vehicle is stationary. But more often than not, during a long, high-speed drive cycle, which in cold climates or cold conditions makes ideal generation temperatures difficult to achieve. On many occasions, this forced method of regeneration is disabled for safety reasons. When this happens, it's normally a real practice to replace the DPF. As I mentioned earlier, every DPF technology currently available utilizes what's called a wall flow filter or a DPF filter. As exhaust gases pass through this filter, emissions of the particulate matter, carbon monoxide, and hydrocarbons are trapped in the filter and are reduced by up to more than 90%. This trapped diesel particulate matter settles inside the filter walls until the temperature reaches levels that allow for the DPM combustion or diesel particulate matter combustion. The process of combusting these trapped particles inside the filter without an intolerable buildup of engine back pressure is what we call filter regeneration. People who think of this as a self-cleaning for the DPF are practicing a little wishful thinking. It's not that simple. To truly clean a DPF involves taking the filter out of the exhaust system and putting it into a special cleaning chamber, as you see on the bottom right corner of the screen. Regeneration may occur during normal operation. It occurs during a diagnostic session. Allow the process to complete before continuing diagnosis. Know that during regeneration, your data stream may be giving you some biased or displays on your scan tool. So you can tell the DPF regen is complete before trying to diagnose any vehicle problems. Exhaust temperatures are raised to burn contaminants on the filter and internally in the filter, reducing them to ash. The frequency and length of regeneration are determined by the drive cycle, ambient temperature, vehicle speed and load, as well as drive style. The frequency and length of regeneration events fluctuate between manufacturers, whether it's Dodge, Ford, General Motors, whoever. Regeneration can vary from between 100 and 600 miles and last from 10 to 40 minutes. Driving at lower speeds and stop and go conditions may result in a longer duration time for a regeneration event to successfully complete. Also, I want you to remember that the exhaust system has been designed to deal with the temperatures involved in the regeneration process. The exhaust should not be tampered with or modified, even though a customer may want that done. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it and a lot of safety features. One is on long weight wheelbase models. Many have a heat shield that protects the rear axle shock absorbers. Also, all models have an exhaust cooler at the end of the tailpipe. This creates a vacuum as air passes through the opening, or exhaust passes through the opening. It creates a vacuum that draws in cool air, which mixes with those exhaust gases and cools down the exhaust tip out away from the vehicle. They can get extremely hot. Remember, we were just talking about 950 degrees. During normal vehicle operation, the ECM estimates the amount of particulate accumulated in the diesel particulate filter. The ECM keeps track of operating conditions to determine the amount of particulate accumulation and periodically initiates a regeneration process. The exhaust differential pressure sensor measures the pressure difference between the inlet and the outlet of the DPF filter. When the pressure differential has increased above a calibrated threshold, it indicates a high particulate load condition. The ECM then commands a regeneration in order to restore the DPF. The exhaust pressure differential sensor is also used to monitor for cracks or holes in the filter substrate. During regeneration, two temperature sensors are used to monitor this process. One sensor located ahead of the DPF sensor measures the temperature of the gases leaving the diesel oxidizing catalyst and entering the DPF. This temperature measurement is used by the ECM to control fuel injector flow rate that is used to maintain the temperature necessary for regeneration. A second temperature sensor located after the DPF helps the ECM monitor and regulate the regeneration temperature and helps protect the system. The estimated amount of particulates is based on a number of different vehicle operating conditions, including vehicle speed, engine runtime, and load. During regeneration, several things are being monitored as I've listed up here for you. Battery voltage, distance traveled, engine coolant temp, intake air temperature, turbocharge condition, but there's even more. The engine speed, exhaust gas temperature bank 1 sensor 1, exhaust gas temperature bank 1 sensor 2, also sensor 3 depending on the year of the vehicle, the fuel level of the fuel in the tank, as well as fuel temperature. When the appropriate conditions are met, the PCM initiates the diesel particulate filter regen. The regeneration process initiates while the vehicle is driven and may continue for up to 5 minutes after the vehicle is stationary and as long as the transmission remains in gear. The regeneration process is interrupted if the transmission is shifted into park or neutral positions. If the regeneration process is not complete when the vehicle enters the park or neutral position, the regeneration process may continue during the next drive cycle. It may take multiple drive cycles to complete it depending on your customer, how long they're driving, and if they're aware of needing to leave the vehicle sit and run with the brakes applied or whatever it is that the manufacturer recommends for the DPF regen. The PCM may continue to initiate this regenerating process until the regen process is totally complete based off the sensor input of pre and post on DPF. The following conditions are considered normal while the vehicle is in regeneration, and no repairs are necessary if you notice these. Okay? Regeneration does not initiate until the vehicle is driven at a speed greater than 4 miles per hour and the engine coolant temperature is above 158 degrees. Now, if you notice white smoke from the tailpipe during cold ambient temperatures, such as in the morning, that's pretty normal. The engine responsiveness might be slightly different. You may have a different smell coming from the exhaust. The pitch or sound of the engine may sound different. The air induction or a flutter sound on acceleration or on engine shutdown may be noticed. The EGR valve is not operational, and the throttle body is active during the regeneration process. All of this would be normal situations. The majority of vehicle manufacturers have the same warning light sequence, but you should always check a vehicle owner's manual to be safe and make sure that you understand their sequence of lights. If the normal driving does not provide the necessary conditions for regeneration to occur, the pressure differential continues to increase across the exhaust filter. The ECM will illuminate a clean exhaust filter message on the instrument panel of the driver information center. Depending on the manufacturer, when this occurs, the owner's manual and a label placed on the driver's sun visor instructs the customer to drive the vehicle under the conditions necessary for regen to take place until the clean exhaust filter message no longer appears on the DIC or driver instrument cluster. However, if the clean exhaust filter message is ignored, the ECM will eventually illuminate the malfunction indicator lamp and the reduced power lamp. At this point, the engine enters a reduced power mode, which required the vehicle to be serviced. The sequence generally consists of the following steps. If the DPF light comes on, this means regeneration is needed. Once again, read that owner's manual for instructions. For example, it may tell you to drive for 20 minutes at a constant speed above 65 miles per hour. If the DPF is not regenerated at this stage and fills to over 90% or 45 grams, the DPF will need replacing. This is not covered under warranty. If the engine management light is on with the loss of power, or what we call limp home mode, will be engaged with a lowered RPM range. The fault code will read DPF soot loading too high. Forced regeneration now is required. So when you're performing a forced regeneration, first ensure the vehicle is in park outside of the building in park or neutral. Make sure you have lots of clearance around the exhaust pipe. The parking brake should be set. The engine needs to be warm. Remember, normally above 158 degrees. And here's a part that I've learned a lot of people don't know. You need to have a quarter a tank of fuel. So if it's less than a quarter a tank, it will probably keep kicking you out of the regen procedure, and you won't quite understand why. Well, you need to have a quarter a tank of fuel. And also check and make sure there are no other fault codes stored. So you definitely want to go in and scan the vehicle. I would do an automated systems test and go ahead and run through the vehicle, make sure there's no other code stored prior to doing the forced regen. Here's a kind of a rule of thumb. If a check engine light comes on first, followed by a DPF light, it normally indicates an issue within the DPF system. For example, a temperature, pressure sensor. You can use the Encore, go live into the data stream and take a look, see what the malfunction is before you try to do the DPF and sit there, scratch your head trying to figure out why it won't force the regen. Use the information that's available to you in your scan tool. So to set up to run DPF regen using the Encore, first we would select the vehicle. Once we're in the vehicle, we go to special test. And you can see on the left-hand side, it says particulate filter test. That's the one we want. You can also see some other nomenclatures down through there, such as SCR dosing, SCR emptying, SCR fast refill. We're going to give you a little glossary on some of what the terms mean that we're not going to talk about tonight directly, but we'll make sure that they're in this presentation. Also, using the scan tool, if you needed to, if you needed to replace an injector, you can go in with the Encore and do a quality adjustment or put in the correct flow numbers that are embedded into the top of that injector, those little numbers that are put in. Most people know what those are today, and they know that they need a tool like the Encore to allow them to do that. And then you can read all of them across the board. The last one down there at the bottom, read all injector quality adjustment coding. So you can read all 8 of those one shot on this Ford 6.7, or you can do each one individually and just replace one if you needed to. All right, so the Encore also gives me the ability to look at the injector electrically. We can look at the glow plugs. We can command glow plugs. We can do a compression test with the scan tool. We can we call that a relative compression, a Dpf regeneration. Now here's a couple that I put in the glossary for you at the end called Suspend Dpf regeneration, dynamic regeneration. So there's multiple things that the Encore is going to bring to you. If you currently have one, these tests are already in that software. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over and watch live, jumping on to an F-250 Ford and do a Dpf regen.
All right, so here we are. We've got our F-250 Ford backed into the garage with a 6.7 turbo. It's a 2012 Ford vehicle, and now I want to show you what we can do with the Encore with that new Bravo 2.0 software. So come on over and let me show you what we're going to do. All right, so now we're on the truck. You can see I've got the Encore with the latest Bravo 2.0 software. So make sure your tool is up to date. I auto ID'd the vehicle, and now let me show you a couple of things, such as where did they put the injector balance test? Let's go find out. It's actually under Read DTCs, not under Special Test. So I'm going to go to Read DTCs, and we can see injector electrical test as well as the injector glow plug test. Not where you expected to find it, huh? Let's back up to the home screen and let's go to Special Test. As we look through the Special Test, we're going to click on Emission Test. Now we can see all the ones we were talking about earlier, such as, let me put my glasses on, the EGR cooler bypass, engine idle shutdown, redundant injector duty cycle. So for all you expert Ford 6.7 guys, this information is impeccable and it's there for you. Remember, it's the latest Bravo 2.0 software. Let's go to particulate filter SCR test. Here is a Regen suspension. Remember, we just talked about the Regen suspension is for when I need to diagnose the rest of the truck without the Regen kicking in while I'm doing my diagnostics. I can stop that, put it in suspension. Next up is the particulate filter dynamic regen. Next is the static regen. What's the difference? Maybe you need to use your service information and make sure you understand. But before I go any farther on a diesel particulate regen, I want to go see the last time that it regened, and I can find that in my data stream. We'll go back to the home button and now go to data stream. As you can see, all this information is right here. Well, let's go to emission data. Now select customize. I don't want to look through every piece of data. I can put it from alphabetical, slide it up and look for everything, and starting with D, right? So I'm going to look for percentage load. I'm going to look for soot concentration. I'm also going to look for bank 1 inlet pressure. I want to look for the last time that it ran, the distance or travel since the last, and there should be one more. Let's do the status so we know if it's ready to regen or not, active or inactive. Hit apply, and all the information I want to know is right here. And we can see the distance since the last regen was 370 miles ago. The other thing that we can see is that this truck traveled roughly 12,000 miles. What's that tell you as a technician? That tells me that this truck sees a lot of open road and not just local city driving. That's a good thing because you know that's what these diesels want. Your customers that do a lot of city driving, that's where you're probably going to have to do the DPF regen. You may even have the check engine light, or rather the DPF light, pop on the dash that says regen now. This is where you're going to find that information in the data stream. Let's go back to the home screen, and now we're going to go back to special test. Now I'm going to go to the particulate filter test, and I want to go to the dynamic or the static test. Let me show you real quick the difference. When I go to the dynamic test, it says if DTC 2463 is set, use this procedure to force the regen. Do you know that code? If not, you need to look it up. Let's go back and see what it says for dynamic static test. This one is the one that you would normally use where there's no check engine light or no forced regen light showing on the dash. See what it says? Run this test outside at least 4-foot clearance from anything else around the tailpipe, because the tailpipe can reach 932 degrees. Make sure you're not parked next to the trash can or a dumpster bin or another customer's vehicle while performing diesel regen. So now the next step is I need to put this truck outside and let's do a regen. All right, so we've got the truck outside. We've got the Encore plugged in. Now we're going to follow the steps on the tool, and we're going to do everything it tells us to do. You may have already done DPF with somebody else's tool that isn't as intuitive as mine, but mine's going to walk me through every step, what to do, what to expect. So the tool's ready to go. Let's get it started up and get busy. All right, so I put the tool into the cab so you can see the screen a little better. We'll start with special test. Remember, we're going to go down to particulate filter, and then we're going to do particulate filter static regen. And as we mentioned earlier, we're just going to follow the steps. It's giving us a warning to make sure that there's nothing around the vehicle. We've already made sure that it's clear. I hit continue. It's giving me a warning. Always perform manual regen outside of a building, keeping exhaust away from combustible materials, because the exhaust temperature and pickup bed get very hot and you can burn your skin just from the hot materials. So stay away from it. We're going to hit continue. It says do not turn the ignition off or press the throttle or shift gears during this operation and apply the parking brake, which I already have. The vehicle is running. I hit continue. Here's another note. It says manual DPF regeneration may take up to 1 hour to complete. Press abort to exit test or to start the engine to continue. So I'm going to hit continue. It says the test will now raise the RPM to ensure engine has operating temperature. Warm up phase lasts 2 minutes. So we're going to hit continue. Okay, so we've edited the video because it can take up to an hour to do a DPF regen. Now that we're at the end of the regen, with idle is back down, allow the vehicle to set for just a couple of minutes and cool off. Remember, that exhaust is extremely hot, and please don't go near it until it has a chance to cool down. But there you go, that's the F250 6.7 turbo diesel DPF regen.
Okay. Time-wise, I didn't have the time to set up and do the next couple of vehicles, but I want to show you using the Encore how to set up and do the same type of thing on the Ram pickups. So again, once you identify the vehicle, you go to engine, then go to special test, and you can see DPF test, and there's your manual DPF regen. Doing it with a General Motors is basically the same setup. Every manufacturer can be a little bit different, but we've done a really good job making our software flow the same, whether it's a GM, a Ford, or a Dodge, doesn't make any difference. So always start with going to the engine module, and then normally always the special test. And on the General Motors, you can see there it's laid out on the left just a little bit different. Engine output controls, and that's where we're going to find the DPF Regen enable. Also, when a DPF is replaced, most vehicles need a DPF reset after replacement. And you can see it's in the list there. Oops, went a little bit too fast. Under fuel systems, this is where you're going to find your balance rate monitor or misfire monitor, injector enable. You can turn them on and off. You can do injector 1 through 8 balance. When we come down to other test, you can see this is where I go in and do the reprogramming for the injector flow rates. So now hopefully you understand when it's time to do a injector replacement on any of these diesels, it's very important that you do the calibration for the flow rates, because they may use those injectors to raise a little bit of fuel consumption to raise exhaust temperature. Remember, that's what they're doing during a forced regen. And then down here at the bottom is pilot injection balance procedures. That is something that needs to be done a lot of times with the General Motors on the Duramaxes. So just want you to know that is available in the Encore software. So let's give you a few things here to think about as we're closing up on the diesel part of the program tonight. These are some useful checks and some nice little advices. Okay. If you're having any types of problem with DPF regen, check the pressure sensors, as there could be a buildup of water. Definitely if you live in the north where you get the big temperature changes, you can find that and have it happen. Examine the exhaust pipes for damage. That's another big one. Make sure that it hasn't been altered. We talked about, the components that are put into the exhaust for a particular reason. There's lots of aftermarket stuff, and there's nothing wrong. I'm not going down the road of saying you should or shouldn't use aftermarket components. I'm talking about the factory stock setup and doing DPF regens. Always make sure and check that the EGR system is working correctly. Make sure that your scan tool using the Encore, you do the bidirectional test, verify you've got some EGR movement. Check that the vehicle has a correct specification engine oil. Man, that's another big one. A lot of people, most shops or all shops that I've ever been in know that, but a lot of customers really don't understand it, especially if they're doing their own engine maintenances. But that is important. If you're working on an active system, always make sure that you've got good def level and quality. Make sure you've got a def tester, whether it's an electronic meter or a fractometer, whatever one you feel comfortable with. When the DPF filter load reaches a predetermined level, remember the ECU activates that regeneration process to increase the DPF temperature, and it can raise it to above 1,000 degrees. The engine is set to run in a certain specific way and can inject up to 8 times more fuel per stroke to produce a high amount of NOx, which will help oxidize the particulates, increasing the temperature as the exhaust gases pass through the DPF converter. So knowing that, it's advisable to check the engine oil for diesel contamination as a result of the DPF regeneration. If this occurs, you must carry out a full oil change and replace the oil filter. And don't forget what we talked about earlier. If you replace a DPF, you're going to want to use your Encore, go in and do a readapt when replacing that DPF sensor. Adjust it to fit the vehicle. Let it know that it's been replaced. Also, remember the DPF will not regenerate if the check engine light is on for any fault, whether it's a DPF fault or any other fault. You have to fix that first. It won't do a regen if the EGR valve is faulty or plugged. The fuel tank must have a quarter of a tank of fuel, or normally around 5.2 gallons, 5 to 5.5 gallons. Also, the fuel light, or if the check engine light is on. So even though you may have 5 gallons of fuel in there and showing a quarter of tank, if that light that says low fuel is on, it's not going to allow it to do the DPF regen. So make sure that you do have enough fuel in that vehicle before doing it, just like doing an evap test on gasoline cars. All right, so as you're thinking, you can go ahead and be sending questions about anything to do with the diesels, and I'm going to move on to our next subject here. And I'm sorry, I jumped my gun. This is the glossary I was telling you about 15 minutes ago that I've also included tonight in this presentation. But these are those terms that you're seeing on the scan tool and what they mean. So the SCR system empty and SCR system refill activation, SCR parameter reset. But then when we get into the Dpf Regeneration Suspend, remember I talked about that. It showed up on the Ford. You use this to temporarily suspend the Dpf regeneration if necessary while performing any other service on the vehicle. So you can force it to not run the DPF while you're trying to do something else on the vehicle. Okay, there's an SCR visual leak check. There's an SCR dosing measurement test, and this is used to verify the quality, or rather the quantity and the flow of the redundant, I'm losing my train of thought, the DEF fluid from the injector, okay? Then the interior quantity adjustment, the IQA. That's the coating we talked about that's on the new injector, and when you replace it, use your Encore, go in and put the new coat in. All right, so now I'm going to move on to my next section, which is a Nissan Altima throttle body relearn. I've been asked about this for a long time, and we decided to go ahead and do a video to show you how to set that up and do it. It's very simple. The biggest thing is following what the scan tool tells you. Don't miss a step. Okay, performing a Nissan Altima throttle body relearn using the Encore, you're going to start by selecting, once you identify the vehicle, select the engine module, then select special test, then scroll to other test, and then select idle air learn and follow the on-screen instructions. It includes warning on engine idle speed, installation of new electronic throttle body. So let's go in and let's show you the video on a couple of tricks, tips, and how to do this with the Encore.
One more thing I get asked about a lot is whether we can do a Nissan throttle body relearn with the Encore. And the answer is yes. I've picked a Nissan Altima and I want to show you the procedure. I've already ID'd the vehicle and I went into the engine module and I'm going to select special test. From special test, we then will scroll down and go to other test. If we scroll in the middle of the screen, it says idle air volume learn. We're going to select that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to follow the procedure exactly like this tool tells us. Just like we saw earlier on the Ford truck, This tool is extremely intuitive and will walk us through doing whatever test it is. Now remember, it's extremely important that we follow the setup of what this tool tells us. And it says right here, the test may take several minutes to run and may need to be run more than once. Beware of that. Also, it says if the engine idle speed is too high, it may abort the test. So let me tell you my trick for doing that. If you install a new throttle body, of course, it's electrically operated. You can't control it. Idle speed's high, will not let you do an idle learn reset. Go out to the engine and disconnect 2 injectors. That'll bring the engine RPM down without loading the cylinders, and it'll allow you to complete the test. Remember that, that's a good trick. So let's go ahead and hit continue. The next step, it tells us to turn the ignition off, release the brake, which my foot is not on it, turn the ignition on for 2 seconds. Now turn it off for 10 seconds. Now we're going to turn it back on for 2 seconds. Now it says to turn it off for another 10 seconds. Remember, you're prepping the PCM to complete the relearn process. So what we're going to do now, we start the engine, we hit continue, and it tells us the engine must be on, the battery voltage must be up, all accessories and loads need to be off, set the parking brake, and idle speed not too high. Remember, we just learned how to get around that. Let's hit continue. We hit start, and right now the PCM is relearning that throttle. All right, so we've got that completed. As you can see, it's not the big deal that you think it is to do the throttle relearn. Remember, in the other test, let me stop this from making noise. Now, remember, in the tool, there are plenty of other tests, such as the idle speed adjustment. These are all things that are available using the Encore with the Bravo 2.0 software that we just released.
All right. I'm not sure if there was a problem with the audio or just audio on my side that I wasn't hearing that video, but I'm hoping that you understood the procedure there. Just to reiterate what I was doing, one of the big things is making sure that the engine speed is very low when you that throttle relearn. And I'm plugging an injector so that the engine RPM would drop down into the specifications that were needed to do the throttle body relearn. So that's just a trick that I've learned in the field and just wanted to share it with you. All right, so again, to be able to do this, all I did was go into using my Encore, select engine. From here, went to special test, other test, and as you can see, there is idle learn volume and idle speed adjustment. And I just followed through what it said. The only thing that I did a little bit different, as I just explained to you, was unplugging the injector, which allowed the engine RPM to drop down into that lower RPM. The specification here just says idle speed not too high. With electronic throttle body, that's a little hard to bring the idle down without just killing a cylinder or two to make that happen. So that's a trick that you can try, and it does work. And then just follow through the procedure until the end, and you're finished. Next on the agenda is something that has become very popular in the aftermarket world, which is battery reset procedures. Many technicians and shop owners that I talk to weekly and even daily don't know that this persists, that this is something that's happened in our industry, other than they were familiar with the European cars, such as BMW and Audi. They didn't know they had moved over to domestic vehicles. So actually, we're going to watch a video here of doing a battery reset procedure on a late model Ford F-Series pickup truck. So if you aren't aware of that procedure for late model Ford pickups, better watch the video. So let's watch the video right now.
All right, there's one more thing I'd like to talk with you about during this webcast. That's a term called FTP. And I'm wondering how many technicians know that term. It stands for Fuel Test Procedures, and it's what the manufacturers that build vehicles have to contend with to deal with gas mileage. One of the ways that they do this is with the charging system. They actually will take the load off the alternator using pulse width modulation, and because of that, there's settings that we can change when a battery is replaced to start that module to understand it's a brand new battery. I'm going to explain more in just a second. But first, I want to show you a few things about the Encore, letting you know that those setup procedures for 08 and newer vehicles, especially domestics, are built into our software. But one of the first things I want to know is like disconnecting the battery. Are there any certain procedures I need to know? So let's go to diagnostic information. When we go there, once we've ID'd the vehicle, the information that we see is directly to this vehicle or specific to this vehicle. I'm going to go to battery disconnect procedures, and over here it tells me the different things that I need to know before disconnecting the battery and before connecting the battery. Now that I have that information, I'm going to go back to the home screen, and now I want to know as a technician some important things about the battery, starting and charging of this vehicle. I can find that today in the data stream on these late model vehicles. So once I go here, right here it says battery data. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to customize the group so I'm not looking through all the PIDs. So I'm going to pick battery temperature. I'm going to select battery state of charge, battery current, battery voltage, and then look at this. The battery, the days of service that this battery's been in this vehicle. Wouldn't that be nice to know? So we're going to hit apply. With this information up here, I can see all kinds of things, such as the battery temperature, the stationary battery voltage, or what we call open voltage. I can see the percentage of charge. I can also see how many days this battery's been in service. Unfortunately, I played with this vehicle earlier and I already set it to 0. But the key here is knowing that I can reset the battery module when I replace the battery. So why is that important? Well, let's think about that for a second. If I have a customer with a battery that's getting old, would the alternator put out more to make up for that low charge battery? Yes, it would. So what do you think happens when you put the brand new battery in? Will the alternator output still be high? Yes, it would. You need to let that body control module know that the battery's been replaced so that the alternator output matches that new battery. Pretty important, huh? So let's go back to the home screen, and now let's go to special test. The first one up is the battery monitor system reset. Now we just follow exactly what the tool says. Turn ignition key on, the key is on. Next up, it says this test resets the battery monitoring system. We hit continue. And it always tells us information. Remember, this tool is extremely intuitive and will walk us through procedures. It says perform the test in the following events. Battery is replaced, or the BCM has been replaced or reprogrammed. This is pretty important information to know, don't you think? Let's go ahead and hit continue. And just that quick, we're done. So remember, this is all about late model cars and what they've done to change on the charging system to increase gas mileage. So I can't tell you every vehicle that has a battery reset procedure. That's on you as a technician to look. But wouldn't it be nice to have it right in the tool like I just showed you? I think it would. So use it.
All right. Well, that hopefully woke you up a few people that didn't know that procedure was available. So also there, we have a link here on this page. I'm going to go ahead and open this link if possible. Nope, I guess I can't do that. Sorry, I'm writing there. But there is a link that can go to otctools.com. And we also have an independent battery reset tool. There's a PDF that shows all the different vehicles that need the battery reset procedures. You can go there and take a look. There are many. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let's take a look. Anything that I can answer in the next couple of minutes if there's any questions, and then I'm going to turn it back over to my counterpart so we can talk about giving away some cool tools.
Yeah, Doc, there was one question, actually a couple questions during the Dpf Regen section. One was, will the tool handle the new Titan XD Cummins diesel? So wanted to question about coverage on that for the Encore.
Did they give a year?
They did not. I believe that that's either 15 or 16. I know that's a new engine in the Nissan truck.
Correct. I have to be 100% honest. I have not been on one to try it,
Okay.
to see. So I don't have a 100% answer. That's one we're going to have to check on and get back with them.
Okay. Yep.
Hey, Doc, this is Pete Meyer here.
Yes, sir.
It's not unusual to answer that guy's question. You're talking about a very brand new model, new engine application. It's typical across all the aftermarket platforms that it could take a few months at the minimum before you guys have the opportunity to get that data from the OEMs and update your tool with it. So, whoever's using the tool now, if they can't do it now, they will when they come out with Bravo 3.0.
That's right, Pete. Appreciate that interjection.
Yeah, well, you were doing such a great job during the rest of it. There was no place for me to comment. So I just enjoyed it with everybody else. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And again, on the Dpf Regen, another question about checking pressure sensors for water buildup and removing sensors to see if water drains.
Correct. I had mentioned that towards the end, so I don't know when that question came in, if that was directed towards my statement that I had made, but I have seen that, especially with the Ford 6.7s, to where the sensor gets a coating of moisture on it, then it's reading on the scan tool. When I go in there and look, it's invalid. I mean, you can tell in a heartbeat that there's something wrong with that sensor because it will be way off from what your normal parameter would be. And they're correct. You definitely need to pull it and inspect it.
Okay. Then moving on to the
question that comes in the chat side, actually asking about being able to browse the internet with the Encore. Of course, that's certainly true. But if I recall, there was a lot of other things that made the Encore a very good platform for point of need information. Can you give these guys just a couple of examples of that?
What you're talking about, Pete, is we have Identifix built into the tool. So if they currently have an Identifix account, all they have to do is put their username and password into the tool. And once they identify the vehicle, year, make, model, and let's say they read a code, when they touch on the code for more information, it gives them the option, if they've got the tool connected to the internet in their shop, to go right to Identifix. When they touch Identifix, it imports over the year, the make, the model, and the code directly into Identifix. It will also do that with Google, because we found that many technicians today, they'll pick up a scan tool, and as soon as they see the code, they're out doing some Google search. Well, we help them. All they have to do is find the code. Once they've got it, they go to Google and instantly they're on the internet with all that Google information. It brought over the year, the make, the model, the code, and whatever. But then it goes on and on and on. We have millions of identified fixes, predetermined fixes built into the tool for assistance on repairing vehicles. And then on one video you saw where I went to the diagnostic page, there is a ton of information there that we brought in, such as key programming or information about TPMS. It's at the touch of a button, and anything that you see once you identify the vehicle is strictly to that vehicle. It's not generic information. This is all embedded internally to the tool.
And a lot of those videos are actually in the tool too, right?
Yes, they are. There's hundreds of videos already in the tool itself to guide them through tests. You're exactly right, Pete.
Yeah, I mean today that's like, especially the younger people who are watching. You know, of course, I mean Google is Google. This is like part of our language now. You know, Google something.
Right.
But I will tell you guys who are listening, and then ladies who are listening, that's fine and dandy if you're looking for that for some help. But don't chase the silver bullet. You know who what your resources are. Know where that source of information's from. You know, at Motor Age, of course, we have a YouTube channel I've had for several years now, and there's a lot of good information there. There's a lot of good information put out by a variety of the aftermarket companies, including OTC and Bosch. And but there are a lot of others out there that profess to be experts that are nothing of the sort. So, you know, just make sure you don't follow that silver bullet. You don't start throwing parts at something, but use that information, apply it to your given situation, and verify that that is indeed the solution for your customer's problem.
Correct. Use that scan tool and verify your diagnostics. I'm with you.
And Doc, a couple questions on the Nissan Idle Air Relearn. One was, will the Relearn continue if the check engine light is on?
It depends on what the code is. I'm trying to think of an experience. I had one, I was in West Texas doing a Relearn. I had a code for, I believe it was PL420 for catalyst efficiency, and it still allowed me to do the Relearn for a replaced throttle body. So
Okay, yep.
it really would depend on the code and the system that the code is determined to have an issue with.
Okay, and it was Norris's question. He's saying an injector code if you unplug the injector.
Yeah, it'll still go ahead and do the throttle Relearn. Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. And then I believe Shane back had answered the question, but a gentleman had asked why you have to unplug an injector during that procedure. I think that was when we were having some audio issues.
Okay, and that's just to bring the engine RPM down to their predetermined. As I had mentioned, it doesn't really tell us. It just says a low idle. But what I have found, it needs to be 900 RPM or lower. Normally, one injector is enough. Sometimes you have to take off two. Just depends on when you put that new throttle body on, what the angle adjustment was from the factory.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, looks like the questions are slowing a little. We did do the drawing for the a package deal, an OTC 3200 battery tester and 3112 battery reset tool. The winners are Jerry Hartleben, Gary Gilbert, Ronnie Twine, Charles Norman, and Vito Tamara. So we've got your information, your email, and contact info through registering for the webinar. We'll reach out to you tomorrow, get an address, confirm the prizes, and get everything out to you within the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
Congratulations, guys. You're going to enjoy those tools.
Jealous.
And again, we'll send everything out. You'll get a question, and thank you for attending this evening. And then we'll have a survey and the full webinar out to you tomorrow to take a look. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And definitely looking forward to your feedback. All right, so thanks everyone, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.